that wonderful introduction, and thank you to everybody. So this is me, just so you know. Then I'll put off my camera and then go into my presentation. So I like to know what people look like when we're talking, and I like people to know who they're thinking about when they see me. So thank you. Let's get into it. Okay. Give me a moment. Okay, I've given it about 10 seconds or 15 seconds or so just to load up. So my presentation should be on your screen. I generally won't be able to see the chat, so we'll hold questions for the end if you don't mind. I timed myself on the presentation. I don't know how long it will take, but I think it fits within the allotted time. So we're going to aim for that. Okay. Before we start, and I want you to pop in via the mic rather than the chat. This is who I think is attending the talks today. If there's anybody outside of this, and if you feel like it, please let me know, again, via the mic, so that if there's a point I'm trying to make and it may relate slightly differently for you in your portfolio, I'll try and make it. Other than that, I'm assuming that we're a bunch of research managers at various institutions. We're a bunch of academics who uses research data, librarians who look after our data, ICT from the various institutions may be in here, and there would be students and postdocs, all interested in good data management. Okay, again, just about 10 to 15 seconds. If more, we'll hold it in. Anybody wants to come in and tell me what they do? Okay, great. Right, let's just go on then. Okay, so what am I going to talk about today? The title is about data management and the international and national perspectives. Okay, so I'm going to start in a very broad manner and then narrow down into you at your institution. Okay, I will probably use the words university and institution interchangeably, but research institution. Okay, so when I say narrow down, I'll talk about what happens around the world and then how South Africa as a country is dealing with research data, and then you as a member of your university, what you should be doing together with your university to work within the system and provide said data. Okay, so let's start with the talk then. Okay, I looked at three main areas with regards to this to understand the governance of data, which is right at the end, right? First is the privacy regulation and data security. That is an international issue for us to deal with, and it's dealt in different ways around the world, which is why it's important for us to understand and think about who we're working with when we're working with all of this data. All right. Let's just go into it. So we must have heard of the POPI Act, Protection of Personal Information. All right. That's down here. That's us in South Africa. The other big ones we would have probably heard about would be the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation in the EU. Okay. And then there are others, like in America, one of the predominant ones is the California Consumer Privacy Act and the Health Insurance Act. There's one in Canada. South America, predominantly the Brazilian one. Australia has a Privacy Act. China has a Personal Information Protection Act law. Right? Why is this important? Okay, when we are working with people in these countries, we need to be cognizant that they are going to protect their citizens' information under the guidance of their laws, acts, and regulations. Okay, so when we're working with them, even though we are here in South Africa, okay, when we're sharing data, when we're working with data, we are going to have to think about how they would want us to process it. Okay. In most cases, as I will get into more detail later on, it is governed by the institutions you're working with or the grants that you're applying for, etc. And a lot of it is dealt with for us, but there is a lot of information. Okay, so with regards to all of these different acts and regulations, etc., mostly they are all the same. Okay, they are all intended to protect individuals. right? They are similar in what they are trying to achieve. Wording obviously may be a bit different. And where things become more interesting is that at the bottom, oops, sorry, let me go back up. At the bottom, it says there are different requirements and enforcement mechanisms, right? So what does this mean, right? In South Africa, it's an act, which means to break it, I mean, there could be serious consequences. In other places, it could just be guidelines because the country doesn't have something at such a high level, okay? But generally what happens is when we're working with various countries is that these acts and regulations are interchangeable. And in most cases, when there isn't something, people rely on the GDPR. Okay, you'll see at the bottom, I said there is some reading. So you can do a little bit of reading, and we can share this in the chat, these links in the chat, about the similarities and differences between the GDPR and POPI and give you a better sense of what's going on. But the main things I want you to consider why all of these acts and regulations are there, right, is that one, it's about how would you like to be treated? What information of yours, if you give it to somebody, how would you like it to be treated? Would you like it to be thrown out into the world? Videos made on YouTube about it, which could be embarrassing, or it could lead to things that you don't want people to know about you. So in the same way that you would like to be treated in a confidential manner is the way you would treat the data you should be working on. Okay. Big point I put in there then is who owns the data. Okay, we'll speak about it in more detail in governance right at the end of the presentation, but it's important to know that the data belongs to the people who's paying for the studies. Okay, so if you're getting something, grants from the UK, generally they own the data and there's agreements on how the data works and with your institution. So we'll keep that in mind. Okay. Also then, depending on the nature of your research, where you get the funding from and the size of the research, etc., there will be regulations and contracts that you would sign and agreements you would agree to when doing the research on how to manage the data. And generally, in most cases, is what the funder wants. So keep that in mind. Okay, so I think now we've got a little bit of an idea of what the international perspective is all about. We can read a lot more into it. It's fairly legal, okay? So it's not necessarily something we all just off the top of our heads understand. But with a bit of patience and with a bit of practical thinking behind it, we should be able to get through it. Okay, so now we're starting to move towards the South African context, but still POPI, which is recognized internationally and again, compared with the GDPR in many cases. What are the key objectives of POPI? Okay, POPI, the South African Act. So it says that process lawfully and in a transparent manner. So whatever data you get when you're doing research, okay, you've got to process in a lawful manner as per the Act, and it's got to be in a transparent manner. So in other words, you can't add data that you don't know anything about and pretend that it is part of the original data sets that you had. So that's what the transparent manner is. You'll be able to account for every single bit of data you've collected and you processed it lawfully. Okay, a big one when we're doing our research and we're sending out people to collect our data, etc., is that we need to get consent from the individuals before processing their personal data. Okay, so generally, if it's surveys or if it's recordings or whatever the case may be, we must have records that we've asked people for consent so that we can use their data. Okay, something else you may want to do if you've got a longitudinal study or if you think your data will have value is then to ask the people to allow you to use it for secondary studies. So while you're studying one thing, you want to allow it for secondary studies. You may be confronted with questions like, what are these secondary studies? And you may not always know. So we just need to be a bit careful about that and have answers prepared. Okay, because the secondary study may be so far out of the comfort zone from what they're originally agreeing to that they don't want it. And if that's the case, we need to be sure that we're protecting their personal information. Implementing security measures and protecting personal information. Okay, most of the data in the world now exists in a digital format. When it's in a digital format and we're sharing digitally, it means it's going through networks, it's going through the internet. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. And the moment any data is collected on a digital format and connected to a network, the safety factor goes down. So we need to make sure that we protect ourselves, our institutions, and of course, I mean, think about it, the people and their data. So we've got to abide by good security measures. And there's a bunch of questions I put at the end of the presentation that help us make sure we get through these things in a good manner. Okay. And the last one Poppy is big about is that if there is data collected and it may be factually incorrect, people have private citizens, everybody, the people you collected data from, have the ability to go in there and be able to correct the data. Right? So these four main key objectives of what Poppy is trying to achieve, but there's obviously a lot more behind the act which we need to be cognizant of. Okay, so now we're doing quite well, moving a little bit faster than I thought we would. So let's look now at data management in the South African context. Okay, so in South Africa, we've got many national level institutions and areas that help us with data management. I mean, they work together with the DSI and government and higher education, Department of Higher Education, etc. And we look at how we enact all the acts that we've come up with. From a university and research institution perspective, the big ones at a national level, there are others, but the big ones are things like the CHPC, which is the Center for High Performance Computing. All right. They would work with you, giving you access to storage, okay, and high performance computers to run machine learning or artificial intelligence on your data, etc., whatever it is you want. Okay, so that institution is there. There is DERISA. DERISA is specifically looking at managing data, making data available, guiding on how to collect data and on how to prepare your data management plans, etc. And they act on behalf of the country and the National Research Fund in a big way. Some other initiatives put together from excuse me, put together from a bunch of universities, predominantly in the Cape, is Ilwazi and Ilifu. Both of these are about collecting data in different disciplines, health disciplines, astronomy disciplines, and some others. And they are making headway in providing infrastructure, in other words, hardware, IT, storage, all of those kinds of things, and good discipline and metadata schemas for collecting data in the various disciplines in an organized manner that allows it to be a national asset. Okay, in some cases, an asset for the universities or the funders, and collecting it such that it can be made usable for secondary studies. I then put at the end Figshare and Globus. These are tools, internationally recognized tools, built on predominantly open source, in other words, freely available kind of architectures in some cases, and a fair expense to cover their development and their IP. So that we can use these tools. What is Figshare? Figshare is a repository tool that can exist between multiple institutions. From my last count, 22 South African universities have Figshare, which makes the sharing of information, or at least understanding that information is available between the institutions, is there. The other 4 universities are working on their plans and strategizing whether they want to join Figshare or not. And so you should ask your institution about that. Globus is a data sharing tool. We could put data on Dropbox. We could put it on Gmail. Many of our institutions have Dropbox and Gmail corporate accounts or education accounts, Microsoft accounts for that matter. And we can do sharing via that manner. But for large data and research data, Globus was set up specifically to manage this type of data. So we can bear that in mind. And again, talk to your institution about whether they have Globus or not. And sometimes they don't, because there are some infrastructure requirements in it. Then we get hold of people like Tenet and they can guide us on how to use Globus. Okay, so the main points about all of these institutions that exist out there and these tools and that exist out there is that they are in many ways African-led data science platforms, and they provide environments to apply data science techniques on diverse data sets. Okay, see the big words coming out here is data science techniques, and diverse data sets, right? So everything in good data management, good data usage, and finding the right tools and powerful tools to manipulate and manage data falls under the band of data science, okay? One thing that's very important for guiding the way we will be collecting and using data in our research is data management planning. Okay, I will talk more about it later, but just bear that in mind. It's very important tool that we need. Okay, data deposits. As I said, all of these above areas do offer data storage. Some of it at a cost, some of it not. So you've got to think about how and where you're going to collect your data and where you're going to be storing it. And there's different stages of storing data in the research process. When you're out in the field, it'll just be on your laptop or your tablet or maybe your phone until you can get to somewhere where you can download it to a more permanent basis and eventually move it off to your institution storage, if that is available. Okay, you'll be working closely, and the questions will ask this, you'll be working closely with e-research type officers, with ICT, and probably the librarians, because they are the final custodians of the data. Okay. Other things that are important that these institutions do and your universities could be offering as well are digital object identifiers. Okay, this is taking off and becoming something big. So in the same way your published work is referenceable and cited and you get recognition for it, digital object identifiers create permanent spots for where your data is located, and that itself can be referenced and cited, and it adds to your own profile. So we want to get those in place. If it's not done via your institution, sometimes your funders will do it, and then you can put that under your reference and put it in your ORCID profiles in it as well. I've mentioned secondary use. Always keep this in mind. We always see value out of our data after we do our primary study. So let's give ourselves the opportunity to do secondary research on the secondary data. Okay. Finally, there's archiving. This is where the library gets in as the final custodian of the data. When the projects are over, embargo periods, everything are done with, the library generally looks after the data. Different data has different value. In my experience, data access committees come into play here. We cannot be experts in every single data set or every different discipline of research. So we get people who are experts in that, and they can help us determine the value of data so that we can keep it. Why this is important? There's more data out there than we can, as a world, even store and keep into perpetuity. So it's very important to understand the quality of the data and how it will help us do research so that we can progress, and advance society. Okay, so I've written there at the bottom, your institution is working with or should be considering working with these initiatives. So because it's South African at a national level, wherever you're from, UNISA, WITS, any of the, UCT, any of the other institutions in the country, should be thinking about working with them, or at least drawing some experience and information from these institutes that I mentioned up above, so that they can get a holistic view of managing data at the national level and then contributing to the international community, such that it's in a way everybody can work with. Okay, so now, again, yeah, so I see, yes, I am moving a little bit fast, but that's fine. Now, we've discussed the international level. We've narrowed down a little bit to how South Africa deals with things and a few of the areas that are in place to help us with managing data at a national level. And now we're coming to institutions, okay? So now, what do universities, right? University institutions do. So I've broken this up into two parts. There is the NRF, where we apply for funding, and there are internal calls where the universities and institutions themselves give money for research, okay? At this level, in most cases, POPI would be the biggest act that we need to comply with. And sometimes if we're doing cross-border type of research, there would be others. So we need to be quite familiar with POPI if we are getting NRF calls, NRF grants, or internal calls. Okay, the NRF through DERISA offers a data management plan template, which is quite comprehensive, and If you're working within the institution, you can draw on, and the questions will come later, you can draw on the expertise of the research offices, libraries, and IT on how to answer some of these questions. Okay. In other cases, for internal calls, they may have their own, your institute may have its own data management plan. Like in our case at WITS, we've made our own data management plan, but we've drawn from the NRF and other big funders to see what's the pertinent information that should be in these things. Okay. Who owns the data? When it comes to the NRF or the university, it depends. The NRF, as a national infrastructure, makes the data a national asset, and you've got to comply with what the NRF requires in terms of looking after the data because they own it. And if it's the university, likewise, what does the university say? What policies are in place? What storage is in place? How do you manage the data? Where do you put it? What procedures and guidance and standard operating practices that are in place are the type of questions you're going to want to ask. Okay. The DOI minting, it can be done at the NRF level or at the university level if your university or institution subscribes to one of the DOI minting services out there. Again, see that the recurring theme, why I put it in the all the time secondary use is that very often people think they're going to do additional research with their data, okay, and they don't ask for permission to do so. So just be very, very wary of that. And lastly, very importantly, is the library's role. They are the institute custodian of the data. So make their life easy and work together, and everybody's life will be made easy if you look at what protocols, what standards and everything the library wants so that you can work with your data. By now you're probably thinking, but hold on a second, I'm not using people data, I'm just using astronomy data or the data from a mining plant which got nothing to do with people. So yes, that is very true. In those cases, you probably wouldn't even look at POPI. But my guidance then on that is to always refer to your ethics committees to say, this is the research I'm doing. This is the type of data I am collecting. I just want you to be aware of it, and I want you to tell me what to consider or to just give me the go-ahead so that I may continue. Okay. Other places that universities would collect funds for research from are grants, big grants like the Gates Foundation in America, there's Wellcome, and there's a lot of others out there. Some of them your university already partners with and is working with, and in others, and you may be the pioneer within your institution to start working with some of these funders. Okay, in these cases, obviously the scenario changes because now we're working much more internationally. All right. So while you would always still consider POPI when requesting funds from these funders, GDPR is probably going to more come into play. Okay, GDPR can act in the American institutions as well, okay, and any others out there in the world. So you would want to then become much more familiar with GDPR and perhaps do a lot more reading on it. There are courses in that available. I don't know of any offhand. But within an institution, I attended in-person ones, but I don't know if they're available for across universities. But find out and get much more familiar then with the GDPR. From those links that I sent you, there is a comparison between the two, so that's a good place to start. Right now, once we're working with funders, all right, what's going to happen is the funder is going to set out the requirements for your research information and data that you are collecting. So more than the NRF and more than what your university wants, you're going to have to comply with what the funders want. Okay, it happens more so that while you can negotiate and research office legal services can get involved with some of these things, is that we comply with what the funder wants. Okay, the funders will have their own data management plans and stick with their templates. You don't want to give them something that they have to reinterpret the format in which you're submitting applications. Just do what they want. It makes it easier. Okay, they will come back with feedback. If you've been light on what you've contributed in those sections, they will come back to you. But if you work together with your library and your ICT and your research office, you'll be able to give fairly comprehensive data management plans. I've seen some that range from please write 500 words on this to drop downs, right? So just be prepared and accept that there are very many formats in which these things can come across. In this case, who owns the data, right? The data generally belongs to the funders. There may be some question about, hold on a second, but it's South Africans, even though they're funding the research, it's South Africans, so who owns the data? Work with your research office legal services and sort all of these things out. So the big thing about the data governance and the data management is about working with people who are experienced in these fields so that they can help you get through and you can do what you do best, which is the research. Okay, storing data. Okay, so now we spoke about university storage. There are cloud services. Bigger data will probably be stored on your premises, in your data centers, on large servers. Some universities are moving off towards cloud storage, which is fine. If they're using cloud storage, the cloud storage providers have interesting networks around the world where some data is stored maybe in the United States, others in Europe, others in other parts of the world. So the data is not all in one place. So it adds a layer of security, even in terms of the Personal Protection Act and technical security as well. Okay, if you're storing it at your institution, again, the way WITS does it is we have an umbrella WITS security a protocol, and we live within that. Okay, so our data is stored within that. We've got agreements on how the data should be and when data must be made slightly more available. And then the library comes in with that. They've got their protocols. They also will tell you whether they subscribe to open science, open data, or whatever the case may be. And we will store data in that way. Storing it on your laptop or on your phone or something like that, not the greatest idea. These things can break. They can get lost, they can get stolen, etc. And often what happens, especially like on things like phones and whatnot, is we have personal accounts rather than institution accounts, right? So if we open a Dropbox on our personal name, the security, the protocols, the liabilities, everything is a bit different from educational accounts. So just think about it and consider using educational accounts rather than your personal account for storing these data. The funders may have requirements of you. They may insist on say, a Google Drive, for example, and they will have to have it set up according to what they want it, and then you get an account into theirs. Okay, so but just be careful when sharing the data from personal accounts, because it's very easy to click and say, I share with so and so. Think about the requirements you've signed and the GDPRs and the POPI. The DOI minting again, what could happen here is instead of the NRF or your university doing it, is that the funder wants the DOI. Okay, so why this is important is because it's the digital object identifiers become permanent records, just like your papers get permanent records when they're published. It'll become a permanent record, and they want it in adding towards their library of data. So the data may still be stored at your university, but the reference to it would be with the funder. Okay, the rules for secondary use may change under your funders, so you need to be cognizant of it, then whether you would do it under the name of just the university or through the NRF. So bear that in mind as well. But they send you all of these things in their documentation and guidelines, etc. Okay, and then if you're working with funders that the university knows about, like maybe Gates or Wellcome, because they're very well known, your library and as the custodians will normally know what needs to be required there. If not, they will be able to find out. But especially if you're looking at a new funder that your institution is not yet working with, you may want to start working very closely with your ICT and with your library. Okay, so now data governance, the things that you need to do in order to get going with your research. Okay, I would ask the following questions of your institution. Okay, first and foremost is there a policy? Okay, if there isn't a policy or if they're working on one, great, get it from them, get what they've got and read through it so that you understand. If there isn't one, okay, discuss it with the relevant research office, etc., and look at other institutions' research data management policies. A lot of them are very similar. A lot of them are available online, just to get a feeling for what's required out of the research data management policies, because these need to be practical practical documents that you can follow and do things with. They can't be so complex and so difficult that it makes it impossible for you to work. So chances are that if your institution doesn't have one, that these others would apply. Okay, and if there's anything that you learned from these that you want to question, go and speak to your research office. I'm sure they'll be able to help you and you come up with something together. Okay. Do they have practical guides on handling data? What do we mean with this is what are the tools they have in place? And how do they want you to connect it? I mean, do you have to use a portal even though you're out in the field so you don't collect the data directly to your phone? Or what's the nearest contact point between collecting the data and moving it to the institution's repository? That's all about data handling. Okay, do they have specific survey tools that you must use because there's security attached to it? Very good example of this would be RedCap, which is a research survey tool with good security behind it, and it complies with all GDPRs and other person protection regulations and acts out there. Okay, does your institution have a data management plan? Okay, if you do a quick Google search, you'll see hundreds of different examples. Does your institution derive one from all of these, have their own one, which could be completely standalone? Or like where I drew my experience and understanding from was the NRF and some of the other bigger grants to come up with one for Wits University. So ask them if they've got one. If they don't have one, I think the good next step, if you don't have an example given to you, is to use the NRF one. It's pretty comprehensive and it gets you through understanding what it is you need to do. The great thing behind the data management plan is not just that it tells people how you're going to manage the data. It makes you think about all the things you need to in order to look after the data that you've been given responsibility for. Okay. The next question that I would ask your research office is that, will the institution help you develop data management plans? So at Wits, this is where I play a role. I come in with the question. So you may have a question in that, how will you store the data? Okay, and that's where I come and say, Wits University has prescribed to Google for education, so we can store data there temporarily. And when the data sizes increase, we have on-site secure storage. So I put in that part into the data management plans, and I help academics write that because not everybody knows everything. And this is where my forte is. Okay. Then the next question that I have there is, I have research funding, but I don't have access to data managers. Okay, will the institution help in this regard? Okay, so yeah, this is a very good question. We may not be used to collecting data in different ways. Either it's the first time we're doing this type of a study and collecting this type of a data, and we don't know where to go. So does your institution offer you any help in this regard? Very important. If not, we'll have to start looking a little bit further. Right. So why is this important? If you're collecting survey type data, all right, or tabulated data, it's very small. It could be very complex because you're connecting a bunch of tables together with different identifiers, linking the tables, all of those kinds of things. So that's a complex data, but it's fairly small. That problem of managing that is very different from very large data, okay, where you're collecting videos or audio or high resolution pictures. Right, where you would want to store it and manage it in different ways because your cloud services won't be big enough, okay, and your on-site storage is there and you can get to it, but it's slow. So you need to think about these things in your lead times and all of these kinds of things when you're doing your research. All right, we can make this even more complex in that we could have really big data like videos and audio and all of those kinds of things, and they're also complex in the way that they all knit and fit together. Okay, so it's not just an easy thing, and it'll be great if within your institution you can get people who can help you put that together. Then even more important, because we're sharing data across the world, is how do we anonymize the data? Okay, do you have the expertise within your institution? Does the funder tell you how you should be doing it? And if not, where do you get this type of advice on? Again, there are lots of good videos on the internet about that. And when you're looking at these, you can take the advice from them and anonymize the data. And the main thing you need to think about is even if I use a student number without names or anything, these things can be traced back in some ways. So when you're anonymizing the data, you need to think about how you're going to do that. Okay. What about data confidentiality? What does the institution have in place? I mean, there's from a pure technology perspective, there are firewalls, etc. There are spam filters on emails, all of those kinds of things. So from the technology perspective, is the confidentiality preserved? Okay, a little bit more on the softer side and the legal side. What types of disclaimers, etc., are put into the bottoms of emails? And we've all read these things. You may have received this email by mistake. You're not allowed to use it for any all of those kinds of things, right? So you've got all of those things in place. Just be mindful and cognizant of all of that. Okay, then the next thing is what type of research data management software, whoops, I got a typo there, forgive me. Research data software the institutions have. DSpace is the library system that makes data available. I've mentioned Figshare, which is a repository system which can be connected to multiple institutions. And then analysis of data. And then you see I put there in red, careful with cloud software. Why am I saying this? So in terms of analysis of data, we've got Stata, Statistica, Mathematica. On the qualitative side, we've got Atlas, we've got NVIDIA, and we've got a bunch of others. Okay, there's also now software which will transcribe your audio. Okay, now here's where things start becoming a bit tricky. There are many free versions of and open source versions online that will convert your PDFs into text. They will transcribe your voice recordings into text, etc. Be very careful with these. We don't know what the terms and conditions are behind using them when you sign up for these things. Best bet and to keep yourself safe is to consult with your ICT, with your research office and your library, what tools they have, okay, that fits the privacy regulations of the university, the country, and globally the GDPRs and all of those kinds of things. Okay, you need to think about it like this. Why would some website offer a free service? Remember, what's in it to them? I mean, they're burning electrons through running electricity and keeping their servers and that going up. There must be something in it for them. How they are using your data in the background, we don't know. We don't want to get into that difficulty, right? So I would advise against just using any cloud service out there. Okay. Does your institution have on-site storage? Always best is if they've got storage facilities in a central data center, which is behind firewalls and protected and doesn't get affected that much by load shedding or anything else like that. Your data stays there and it's safe. If you keep it on your own devices, if it's in your offices on a desktop, load shedding may hit, you may lose the data, you may corrupt your hard drives. Okay, on mobile devices, as I said, could get stolen, could get dropped and broken, or whatever else can happen. So try always to get it to the most secure central type of an environment. If your institution is using cloud, note that cloud generally is very expensive. So when institutions use it, they may only use something called a cold storage type of facility where it's archived, and to get it back, you may have to have a 30-day period or something like that. So depending on the pace at which your research progresses and how quickly you need the data and what you need to do with it, just ask these questions of your institution and your ICT. Okay, is there infrastructure for handling data and data sharing? We've spoken about the things like Figshare and that, which are repositories. On top of Figshare sits metadata schemas, which tells us about that data, and there's standards out there in the world. Most of you know some of these things, or all of this probably even better than me. So that's handling your data in a very nice infrastructure manner, and the data sharing. It could be through two institutional Google Drive type of scenarios, or we could use Globus for large data, or in some cases, we've had situations at WITS where we had an encrypted laptops sent to us. So the laptop is sent, and separately the passwords and that are sent, so that if the laptop gets stolen somewhere along the way, it's useless to the people. The passwords come separately, so that if the password gets intercepted, the machine is already in a secure environment. So we got to think about these things, okay? And if that's how you need to get your data, then that's how you need to get your data. Why the laptops were sent to us is they didn't want it on networks. Okay, so everything required to analyze the data was on the laptop and everything was encrypted. You may be dealing with these type of situations and you may already know about it, so keep that in mind. Okay, the last question I put there is there support structure for handling, for data handling and data sharing? Okay, a support structure is we're not all data experts. We don't know how all to use Globus or this tool or that tool and that. What is there available in the university? Okay, it may not. There may be formal training, right? Or there may be people who have been using for a long time and are happy to share their experience and advice with you and do a little bit of training for you. Okay. Also, also what happens is that these, like for example, ICT may have a relationship with Tenet and other institutions so that they can work through using something like Globus for the data sharing. So it's always good to know these things so that if you run into problems, you're not then trying to figure out how to deal with it then, but just know upfront, I could be experiencing this, and that's how I deal with it. Okay, so now, coming towards the end now, this is my last slide, okay? So the things to think about when managing data, right? So this is you, okay? What you need to think about so that you can manage data in a good way when you're working on a national and international level is to be cognizant of the various acts, laws, and regulations out there, okay? For a start, I would look at POPIA and GDPR, okay? And if you're working in different countries, see if they have everything. And the institutions that you're working with will always be able to help you and tell you, okay, that we actually prescribe with this or we don't have anything. But think first, South African first. I always have to abide by POPI. And for the rest of the world, if there isn't anything, GDPR covers me. So know these and then see what else other countries may want from you. Okay, then you're acting as a good data manager globally. Okay, where and how the data will be stored and shared, all right, in one place or distributed, all right. If you're working in large projects, some universities around the world will want to keep the data they've collected, others will make it globally shareable, or they may rely on you totally to store all the data for all of the research around the world, okay? Remember, I mentioned things about complexity of data. So how do they all integrate and knit together so that the data becomes a comprehensive set and not just disparate pieces of data all over the show. So keep that in mind. Okay, and mostly your funders will tell you how they want this done. And when you're working on a large collaborative project, each institution will also tell you what they want. And then you put it all together, and that's how you'll be storing and sharing your data. Okay, the originality of data, replicated and synchronized, and version control. Okay, originality of data, there's a few ways the originality of the data is created. You either collected it from scratch, or you procured it, or you derived it. Okay, so you need to look at the version control of your data to say, this is what I originally collected. I then transformed it in some way, and you need to keep a check on, I transformed it, create version 2 by doing this, this, and this, and manage it in that way. This is good data management, okay? And it makes your data set worldwide acceptable and usable by other people because you fully followed the train of what you wanted to do with it. Okay, synchronization, what this means is you're going to have data on your laptops, on your phones, or whatever the case may be, and eventually you have to get it to a central store where it is more safer, and there's synchronization issues. You may do it once a week, you may do it ad hoc, you may do it live, and depending on the grant and what tools they give you to work with this, or whatever is within your institution, what's best that your institution can manage, you'll synchronize data in that way. And then the last one is very important because we don't know everything, and we all have to do this working collaboratively, is working with your ICT and working with your libraries on your data management. Okay, when you're starting your project, and you get all the requirements out of the funders or NRF or the local calls within your institution, what technology, infrastructure, and data management tools you need to have in place. You won't know all of them. Speak to ICT, speak to library. And I should actually put in there, work with your research office as well. So that it's, I put this comment in the way that I normally work with it. So work with these three central entities within the organization to figure out what's the best way to do it. Okay, and in that way, you'll get to do your research, which you will love and enjoy, and you'll do it in an environment where the data is managed. Okay, so that is my last slide. I'm going to put this slide up now in case you want to talk to me. Okay. Whoops. All right, so that's my name. Okay. That's my cell number if you want to call me, and that's my email address at Wits University. At any stage, you are free to contact me. Right, so now I'm going to leave this up for about a minute or so. Somebody came in on the mic there. Is there a question you want to ask me?
Thank you, Dr. Tariq. We have a hand up from Dintwalo, but there was a question from Rahadi in the chat. Does this suggest that employing transcription software is considered unethical? And then Dintwalo will go ahead after. Thank you.
Okay, so no, using transcription software is not unethical. Just make sure, whoops, are we okay? All right, yeah, so no, you can use transcription software. It's not unethical. You will make mention of which tool you've used in your research to say I've used Microsoft has one and Google have one, and if you can get
Dr. Tariq, you muted.
Sorry about that. Okay, there I'm back. I'm just going to stop sharing. Okay, so that I can get to the big screen. Okay, fine. Let me start that again. Okay, it is not unethical to use transcription software. Okay, my recommendation is make sure you use one that your institution is happy with. Make sure you mention that you're using a transcription software in your research and which one it is you are using. Okay, and if you're going to go a little bit further to use tools similar to GPG, ChatGPT, etc., know that they do a little bit of interpretation. Right? So if it's going to interpret your data, you need to acknowledge that this could have happened and there could be a misinterpretation. Okay. Other complexity we've got is that we may be working in different languages and we may not be able to get good transcription out of the different languages. So just note that there could be loss in translation, loss in interpretation, and that the tool you've used is fairly secure and within your university's allowed set of research tools. I hope that answered the question. Do you want me to go through more about that? You just let me know. There was another question after that. You said somebody wanted to come in. Who was it? Tinswalo.
Tinswalo. And then Dr. Nandipa after.
Sure. Okay.
Good morning once more, and thank you very much for this insightful presentation. I just want to know if one is planning to use secondary data from various institutions, maybe for example, for a specific industry, and you find that you are maybe doing a comparison among those institutions, do you still need to go through the same route for ethical clearance and make sure that you get permission, even if the data is publicly available on the public domains?
Generally, if it's on the public domain, you don't have to worry about that, okay? Because when they sign up, they know that the data was put into the public domain. What I would then do is just speak to your research office ethics committees and make sure that they are okay with it, and they will give you, in Wits's case, they give you a certificate to say you can go on. Okay, happy with that?
Yes, noted. Thank you.
Okay, then I saw a few hands pop up at once. Who's next?
Advocate Nandipa.
Good morning, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. Mine is with regards to the issue of data storage, which is you spoke about the choices states use to either store data extraterritorially. My concern that I would want you to speak to are the data adequacy protocols that are different across states and jurisdictions, and then they actually determine the access and also the access to that particular data and which data they can make available. How then do you deal with that if the data storage capability is extraterritorial?
Okay, so this is a very difficult one for me to answer because the route we chose with regards to storing research data was not to use extraterritorial facilities, in other words, cloud facilities. And we keep all of our data on site. Okay, we keep some backups on tape results, but that's all still within the country. So that's the route that we've chosen as the Wits University for now. That may change in the future because it may start becoming infeasible for us to store the data on site with everything that happens. Okay, so now how do you deal with it? Okay, the big companies out there like the Amazons and the Googles, etc., have very specifically store their data across different territories which are governed by different acts and regulations, so that in no one place is there a full data set that could be requested from the governments, for whatever purposes that the government needs. So this is how they sort of manage these kinds of things. I'm not able to speak on a professional level about the ethics behind that kind of a scenario, but it is happening out there in the world as far as we know. Okay, if you were to work in these type of situations, the best place and the best way to manage this is to work very closely with the funders. Okay, the better funders have very comprehensive ways in which they want you to deal with this, and everybody has to comply with that, right? So then at the very lowest level, which is not something that we should be aiming for, we're aiming for the highest level, but then at the very lowest level, okay, we are covered in the sense that if there's any liability, we have followed these protocols. At the very best, we're going to do what we can as the best to protect personal information. I hope that answered your advocate.
Yes, to some extent.
Yeah, as I said, very difficult one. Okay, who's next?
Thank you. Joseph is next, but before Joseph, there's a question in the chat. Could you please explain what fair data movement is?
Okay, sure, that's a long one. So fair data is, well, I can't even remember what it stands for directly, findable, etc., etc., etc. Right? So there are many different organizations and concepts out there about sharing data. Okay, the world's data, because it is about us as people, needs to be shared in a fair and respected way. And basically, FAIR covers that. So what they're saying is it's an international accord. So in other words, we all as institutions agree that we will abide by this good behavior for the benefit of all mankind. Right? At a high level, that's what it is. At more detail, I really think let's just get together and we can talk about it and go through what FAIR does. Right? Because there are others. Go for it. I see who wants to explain it.
Makobo.
Go
Makobo
for it.
is our next speaker.
Oh, it's on. Okay, great. Yeah, good. So thanks. Okay, so let me not go into more detail because then Makaba will do it for us. Okay, who's next?
Joseph.
Joseph?
Now, yes, secondary studies that involve the time before the regulations were passed. In other words, can the regulations be applied retrospectively? We know that the ethical clearance environment has been evolving quite speedily nowadays. So if you have data from long ago that you would like to restudy, maybe, what is the situation in that regard?
Okay, so that is something we are battling with at Wits as well. Okay, we've had a few cases where we've addressed this. Some we found that it was okay to use. In some cases, we found that it wasn't. Okay, our general conservative approach, though, is to say no, and then to look at the data and to see with a bunch of expert minds, as I said, the data access committees, all right, with a bunch of expert minds to see whether we are breaking any regulations or acts or anything about that. So deal with it on a case-by-case basis and take it from there.
Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
No problem, sure. Okay, who's next?
Zambezi.
Zambezi, hi. Zambezi? I think let's move on. I see Dr. Kohli.
Yes.
Thank you, Tando, and thank you, Dr. Tariq. I think you've covered my concern. However, there's another little part that I need clarity on, the part that the data belongs to the funder. I wanted to check with you, does the ownership has a lifespan? When does a researcher or field worker have an ability or access to use that data? After how long, or once the researcher or the field worker is done, the data is handed over or is owned by the funder? Will there a time where the researcher for another purpose use that data as a secondary data, because this is a person who would have collected the data, who has the original information and perhaps wants to use it for another purpose? What are the dynamics surrounding that? Because I understand that you have cleared my concern that the data belongs to the funder, which I'm happy with that. But for how long does that data belongs to the funder? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. So again, the different funders will tell you in the agreement that you sign with them who owns the data and for how long and what embargo periods, etc. are. Okay, but also as the principal investigator for the project, you have signed on to say, I will use this data for good research. And somewhere in there, you've also said there will be secondary use for the data within these guidelines. All right. And in such case, because you are the principal investigator, you will always have access to this data. You will always acknowledge the funder. Okay. And if you're being funded by other people to use the data, you'll have to get agreements between the parties, and you'll be able to use the data. Embargo periods range from 2 years, sometimes 5 years, sometimes forever, depending on the nature of the data. We had one case where there was actual video footage of violence against women and children. That was never given any public domain access ever. And obviously you can understand why. Even if faces in that could have been blurred out, okay, it was still not given because there could have been other identifying marks, say on the bodies that people may then say recognize who it is that came out. So it just depends on the situation. Always work with the funder, and if you're the principal investigator, generally you will have access to that data. I hope that helped, Doctor.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, I see advocate again.
Thank you very much. Allow me to lean on what Utok was asking, but I want to ask it differently.
Okay.
The issue, you said there is a relationship that you cannot run away from, which I agree, the one with a research and policy entity that guides policies around research. Allow me to talk to this common paragraph that we always like to have, that the IP belongs to the university. And I want to latch on the one that you've spoken about the data belonging to the funder. How do you reconcile these? Because at the end, they have implications in terms of the IP issues. You have a funder, you have the institution.
Yeah.
And I don't want to complicate it further and say you have someone working at the funder, but is studying at the university. In terms of there's an output side, there's an IP management side, and the role then of the research capability, whose policy defines the parameters of IP exploitation. So can you situate data there? Thank you.
Okay, so advocate, you're now going beyond my expertise in the way you're asking this employee. There is my colleague, our research office legal advisor, who will be speaking, I think, at the next session, not today, at another session, but let me try and do my best. I see clapping hands there somewhere. Yeah, so let me try and do my best. Yeah, okay. Generally, there's a very good relationship between the funders and the universities and the use of the data and IP. And as long as we're acknowledging each other and using things in a responsible manner, we don't run into any difficulties. Okay, we had one or two situations where there were special requests of the data and we worked through it and it was granted. And in other cases, as I said, like that violence one, it made sense not to even pursue it in that matter, in that manner. Okay, so while the data may be owned, the use of the data is not necessarily blocked. We've never come in situations where the data was just blocked for no good reason. And in that way, wherever the IP sits and wherever the research does, and whether we've got funders representatives working with the university as part-time staff, whatever the case may be, we managed to overcome these things. But it much more then becomes a matter of an agreement and falls within, I think, the legal and ethical domains rather than the e-research domain like mine's. So I hope I've answered it to some extent, even though I couldn't give you a full legal or ethical answer on that one. Is that okay, Advocate?
But I hear you. But remember, the IP is a function of the law that guides it. The IP for patenting and the IP for trademark is not the same as IP for copyright.
Okay.
And these are regulated by different pieces of legislation that assign rightfully who the owner is in a different way. So that's why I'm asking this, because it's one of the matters that at some point we need to be we need to tease it, dissect it, and yes, so that we don't, in the process of protecting the integrity, we don't violate the existing IP laws regarding that particular IP that is being developed. Because if it's a patent, it's different from it being a trademark. It's different from it being just a generic copyright. So probably it could be a discussion for another time, but it's critical that we engage on it.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think everyone here, all 132 of us here, benefit from what you're mentioning. I'm gonna plead and accept that I'm not an expert in that. And yeah, let's take it up when we get into the legal discussions, whenever that talk happens. Hopefully I'll see you there again and we can discuss it further. Is everybody else happy with that? Advocate, I know I haven't fully answered you, but is everybody kind of happy with that? Great. Okay, we've gone to 10 past. Have we passed my time?
No, you're just on time.
Okay, great. So guys, as I said, this is a very broad subject. My specialty in this is from the technology perspective. Okay, I do get involved with my colleagues in terms of the ethics and the IP and the legal side of things, as you've heard, but I'm not the expert in that. And I've given very high level, but please write to me. Okay, and we can get together and maybe we can have chats about more detailed discussions in this way. I'm happy to share what I understand about the policies we've done, about the standard operating practices we've done. I do a little bit of research and I'm trying to write on different ways of data management. So I'm happy to have these discussions and probably learn myself like I did from Advocate today. So thank you, everyone. I'm sticking around. And I want to hear the next talk.
Thank you, Dr. Tariq. This was a very fruitful session. I've learned a lot. I'll have to watch the recording to make notes because yes, it was.
I can also give you my presentation if you want, and then will you manage then if anybody asks you for it? Tanda?
Yes, I usually forward the presentation after the session.
Okay, so I'll share it with you then. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Once again, thanks everyone.
Thank you. I'll be handing over to Mr. Makaba. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you, Tando, for the invitation, and thank you to Dr. Tariq for such an informative presentation. This is me, just to put a face to the name. I am based at the library in somewhere in Anton Lembede building, Maclinic campus at level 2. I'm responsible for research data management, research data curation. I'm managing our UNISA, our UNISA data repository available on that platform, Fixture. I think Dr. Tariq has mentioned about that platform. We are collecting data, and I will plead with the colleagues that if you have existing data that emanates from your research, please feel free to contact me, and so that we deposit in our data repository. I have included in this presentation, at the end of the presentation, my contact details. And I would like to, unfortunately for UNISA, we don't have a research office at this moment, but we are working collaboratively with the research ethics and the research office. As a library, we are responsible for storage and curating of the data, but also the data planning. It happens within the space of e-research, open research, and landscape and environment. Okay, I would like to switch off my camera and project my. And oh, why am I not able? Okay, to share. I hope you are able to see my presentation.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Tando. Yeah, I'd like to make it my side. Okay. Okay, I've mentioned just for the sake of context that these initiatives are happening within a space or landscape of open science agenda, open science research. The idea is to open up research as far as possible so that we ensure long-term funding. And this, in a way, is seen as a good research practice and as a good standard for good science, so that it betters the research and the research. Okay, these are the open science agendas, the mandate for open science policies, so that we get a balanced open science and intellectual property. And we are curating confidential information. One thing I forgot to mention that is, as you are submitting your data sets into us, make sure that the data is usable as possible, is fully anonymized, so that it identifies the subject participants, and then that also is compliant to the PROPIA Act. So also evaluation of metrics and career pathways for data scientists, training and research infrastructure management. Also, it ensures the long-term funding. Okay. As I've mentioned that I'm involved with the research data management, what is involved in research data management? I've acronymized it as RDM. It involves data management planning. That's what we are here for today. Creating of data as you are collecting the data during your research process. You're documenting your data, and the data, it will be submitted to the library, to me, and it will be stored in a safe and trusted repository, as we have a Figshare and UNISA data repository, and it is stored and storage for backup. Unfortunately for UNISA, we don't have a long-term preservation solution, but it's something that we, library and ICT, that we are working on. So the data is shared through these trusted repositories like UNISA IR and UNISA data repositories by DOI, digital object identifier, so that your data is shared with the colleagues and then worldwide. And then the preservation of data, as I mentioned, that we don't have a preservation solution at the moment, but it's something that we are working on with ICT. So as I've mentioned, that I will explain about this fair data principle. It's just an initiative that the data must be fair. In fair, I mean that the data must be fair. F stand for findable, so that the data that is described in our data repositories, it's findable as possible. It receives a persistent identifier, e.g. UNISA DOI, that identifies the data wherever, if, say, for instance, we're migrating from the software we're using to the other, so that it uniquely identifies that data sets with. Consider accessibility, consider what can be published. We obtain a participant consent. in working with the Research Ethics and Integrity Office, we realized that the data management plan has got overlaps with the consent forms. So I believe that the research office, they were working on the new consent form that will include some elements of the data sets, but maybe Mrs. Kotse can talk better than I do in that regard. We perform the de-identification of the data. We anonymize the data. As I've mentioned, the data is interoperable. For instance, we use different formats, apply consistent vocabulary like the metadata that describes the data sets, and the data is reusable. Consider permitted use and apply machine readable open licenses like your license CBY for instance. Okay. Okay, what type of data that is considered in the research? It can be in any formats. It can be in different documents, spreadsheets, can be laboratory notebooks, field notebooks, diaries, questionnaires, transcripts, code books, audio tapes, videotapes, photographs, films, test responsible slides, architects, specimens, samples, collection of digital output. In most cases, as Dr. Sutri has mentioned, that the data typically, and it will be in a digital format. It can be data files. It can be database contents like videos, audio, text, and images. Okay, what is involved in a research data lifecycle? As you are involved in your research process, typically in the first stage would be a data management plan. You will speak to your funder. If you are not using, you're not NRF funded researcher, I'll show you the NRF template that was developed by Teresa if you are NRF funded. But if you are a privately funded researcher, and I think your data, your funder data management plan will take precedence over institutional or NRF over NRF DMP. So we curate this data in a data repositories. We put the necessary metadata, make sure that it is descriptive and as far as possible, and it is shared. It is shared in a scholarly communication or external repositories like UNISA or the UNISA data repository available in a platform called Figshare. So why would you share your data? It's a funder requirements in most cases. We ensure that for reproducibility, in terms of bettering the research, and to share research data is make sure that it's a good research practice. Also for reuse purpose, if for instance someone wants to use the data for secondary use, but we'll give credit to you and then we'll give citations. Also, it makes sure for long-term preservation, it's a safe, I would consider that it's a safe storage because we have a solution called Figshare, and it's a good science. It's considered to be a good science to share your data. Also for research verification. Okay, let's get into what we are here for. Data management plan, DMPs, are typically written at the start of your research project. So let's say, for instance, you want to apply for funding. So your funder will ask you if you have a data management plan. If you don't, feel free to contact me and I will advise the best possible way as possible. So the data management, it talks about what data will be collected or created, how the data will be documented or described, where the data will be stored, who is responsible for data security and backup, which data will be shared or preserved, how the data will be shared and with whom. So the data management, So the data management plan, it ensures it's a research funding requirements, and it declares on what to share and what not to share, and that the reason that might be. And 2015 NRF released a statement to say that data sets that emanates from the research output, like your research article, thesis and dissertations, that it must be stored in a trusted repository that supports the research output. Trusted repositories, we have that solution available in a platform called Fisher. I've included in this presentation the link to it, and we also make sure that the research, the data management plan is POPIA compliant for ethically and for legal purposes. So this is the link to access the South African data management plan. It is available in this site. DIRISA, Dr. Sokti mentioned DIRISA. It stands for Data Intensive Research Initiatives of South Africa. They are responsible for data management plan, for data and for data storage. So it's a institute that is based at the CSIR. They were contracted by NRF to develop a data management plan. So we have data management plans for different universities. I'll show you how to access this website and how to create a data management plan. So data management plan is increasingly seen as an integral part of the research process. And there are expectations for leading implementation of data, of good data practices. It is a formal document that outlines how will you handle your data both during your research and after the research project is completed. It is a funder requirements, submissions of an advanced or detailed GMP. Data management plans for study or project should include a complete description of data that produced or kept, an indication of how long the data will be stored, a thorough description of storage environment, a description of how data will be made available, and explanation of how data will be formatted and described for reuse and interpretation, clear policies around data access, use, attribution, copyright. Let me mention this also, colleagues, that UNISA, we developed in the research data management policy that was approved in August 2019. Also, for further information about data planning, content, see individual sponsor, as I've mentioned, because maybe if you are privately funded researcher, a different research funder would have a different guidelines or policies or research data management plans. So your plan, for instance, your funder might have your different DMP. So please feel free to use your funder DMP. As we go along, and how to create a DMP, what you need is an access to the internet, an up-to-date browser, access to your email. You register via this, you have your DMP account, you register via this link. And step 2, you click on, if you're not registered, it will tell you how to sign up. So this is the way you go about, this is the link to. So I see that the DMP that NRF or Teresa, that they used, we used a similar data management plan, similar to DCC, that is a UK-based organization, Digital Curation Center. And you access it via this link, and this is the website logo. And it will take you to a sign-in page, and you put in your login details if you have not registered. So there are various DMPs for different institutions. You choose UNISA DMP for instance, in this instance. So this is the DMP DCC checklist. Typically, what would include? This is administrative data. The ID, for instance, your funder, a grant reference number, a project name, the project description, the researcher ID, project data, contact, date of first version, because the data sets can have different versions as you go through your research process. The date of last update, related policies around, because we've got our RTM policy, it can be IP policy for UNISA. Data collection, what data will you collect or create? How will the data be collected or created? Okay, the documentation and metadata. What documentation and metadata will accompany the data? For instance, it could be tablet or metadata schema or data site, because picture the repository that we are using, it uses the data site. It comes as a default, but you can use any other metadata schema that is applicable to the data. And ethically and legal compliance, who will manage any ethical issues? I think research ethics and integrity office are best placed people to answer such questions. How will you manage a copyright and intellectual property IPR issues? Storage and backup, how will the data be stored and backup during research? We have a solution at the library, a fixture that the data can be stored in our repository during because it has different entry levels. It can be open, or we can only open metadata but close the data itself. We can have embargoes, and Dr. Sute has mentioned typically embargoes will take from 2 years and upwards, depending on the nature of research. How will you manage your data, or manage your access and security? Which data should be retained or preserved? We don't have a preservation solution at this stage, but it's something that the library and ICT is working on. What is the long-term preservation plan for the data sets? I think I've spoken to this on this above topic. And data sharing, how will you share your data? Are there any restrictions that data sharing that is required? Responsibilities and resources, who will be responsible for data management? I think the library can advise this topic, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not saying it, I'm an expert on the topic, but I can advise the best possible as I can. What resources will you require to deliver your plan? Okay, this is the link for our data repository. You can self-submit your data, and it will come to me for editing and then approval. You log in using your UNISA credentials, your login details, and passwords. And fair data principle, it means findable. The data must be findable, must be accessible, it must be interoperable, it must be able to work across the other softwares. It must be reusable for ensuring that the data for good science. So what makes a good RTM? Successful data, it's reusable, it is reproducible, it is reviewed, it is comprehensible, it is citable through your DOI that permanently and uniquely identify your data sets. It is discoverable through other repositories. It is accessible, it is preserved, and it is stored. So these are the care. We've spoken about the FAIR. Now they talk about care. Data principles for indigenous knowledge system, for collective benefit, authority for control, responsibility, and ethically. Yeah, that is my story. These are my acknowledgements to these people, because the data management plan that currently used is based on the DCC. And these are the colleagues that we are working hand to hand with in terms of the South African data management plan. These are the people that were contracted by NRF to develop a data management plan for South Africa. Also, some colleagues from UK that we are basing on our DMP on. So these are my contact details. This is our mailbox. This is my email address. I have shared this presentation with Tando colleagues. Please feel free. I hope, Tando, you will share the presentation with the colleagues. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact me, and I will assist as far as I can and as possible way as I can. Thank you, colleagues. I will gladly take questions if there are any. Over to you, Tando.
Thank you, Mr. Makaba. We had a question from Mrs. C in the chats, but I think you covered one or two. Where is our institution's DMP template? The next question is, are there practice guides, and does the institution help with DM? Thank you.
Okay, I will take the second one. Yes, we are more than able to assist with the RTM. I'm responsible for that. Please feel free to contact me. I've left the contact details at the end of the presentation. My task is research data management plan. I'm a research data curator, so I'm best placed to I don't say that I know everything, but I'll be able to assist best possible way as I can. Can you repeat the first question, Tando?
Where is our institution's DMP template?
Okay, okay, let me start this. Maybe Tanya, you can come in on this one. We realize that the DMP has got overlaps with the consent forms. The last I know that the Research Ethics Office was developing a new consent forms, but otherwise it's available on the link that I've provided for Dirisa. I will share the presentation. You register and you choose your institution. UNISA DMP is available there. Thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Makaba. I'm just asking because it was questions that Rick alluded to, and I thought that's interesting questions. It's also questions that I receive widely from UNISA community.
Okay.
So we built into the form a lot of questions on data management. There's a whole section on this. It would be interesting to know some statistics, but just to come back, the DCC checklist, is this similar to what we can use as a plan, or is it more checklist?
It's just a checklist, but you can use it as well, Tanya. It's just a checklist. These are typically what it should include.
All right, because okay, sure, that will be nice because we can also load it up on the ethics online system.
Sure.
Maybe to help the applicants.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Yes,
okay,
please.
and we haven't yet looked at the template, but maybe we should ask Dr. Tariq for such a template from Let's see what I have.
Yes.
And let's build some stuff in. I know if Dr. Tariq is still here.
Okay.
So that we can assist the colleagues with data management planning. And I must tell you that there are a lot of statistics of students or applicants that say, yes, we're going to make it available to the repository. And it would be nice to hear some statistics from you. Are people using the repository? Are they data available?
We're not growing as much as fast as I would like, but I think I've seen a quite improvement this year. They are depositing the data sets now. Please go through to our data repositories and see how many data sets there are. But some people have, because Fixture, you can have a private account, but we encourage colleagues to use the institutional account. It adds into our statistics, yeah. But they are using, yes. Thank you.
I see advocate. She's busy.
Friend.
She keeps me busy everywhere.
My learned friend, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's quite an interesting presentation. But of course, I would have failed my area of expertise if I don't ask the question I've asked. Like probably at some point we need to engage with the information regulator because remember at the time when we were about to implement the provisions, after we implemented the creation of the information regulator as an office, Then there were task teams that were looking at the ethics, the ethical code, depending upon sectors. Doctors were meeting, nurses were meeting, research entities were meeting to determine what we call codes. But as I'm listening to you, your DCC is the reason I'm asking this, because one of the reasons you might find that some researchers, I'm not saying it is, the issue of compliance with the GDPR principles insofar as data DMPs is critical. And because the moment you have a compromise, a lot will be at stake. So the reason I'm asking this is probably because in my previous life, I was developing a database of military veterans. And one of the things I had to do was to actually make the information regulator my friend. Because in as much as we would want to share data, right? But the problem is there are protocols to sharing data. If you look at what is happening in the UK, the consent regarding any form of data is getting more rigorous now. And this is the place the information regulator is playing, especially because we are a global institution.
Yes.
with people from various jurisdictions. And those jurisdictions, they have different requirements in terms of the data preservation and all. So well, there's an argument about the rigor of POPIA vis-a-vis GDPR regarding some of the elements, given that POPIA came from the EU directive. GDPR is an improvement of the directive from which POPIA is coming from. So that's the reason why I'm then requesting that at some point we might have to just have a sense, invite them to present so that we get their perspective.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm excited about what I'm saying.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm very, very excited. I will visit you in March. I'm visiting you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm based in Macleneck at level 2 at Anton Lembede, the old summer building. But I've left my contact details up. Okay. Thank you for the comment. I think it's some other time myself, yourself, and other colleagues in the research ethics office, we might have a discussions outside of this engagement. But otherwise, thank you for the comment. Over you to Dr. Sotti.
Thank you. I just want to pick up on something you mentioned before Advocate came in about some people using their own accounts. And we were very soft in saying we prefer they use the institutional accounts. Let's be less soft. We must use the institution's account because there are different terms and conditions when it comes to using education accounts. Right. So let's let everybody here, please, guys, do us all a favor. Let me give you a very interesting example. All right. Slightly away from this, drone use. I have a private remote controlled access license. So I can fly drones in that as I want for personal use. And I've got cover in case I hurt somebody with it. But if I fly it for the university, I'm not covered. Even though I'm covered for myself, I'm not covered. And if somebody wants to try and then say, well, we can't sue Tariq, let's sue the university because they've got bigger pockets, the university is going to be in trouble. So we put in place we had a discussion firstly with the insurers, what they require from us, and then we put in place a form and a process and everything that people must be registered to be commercial drone pilots so that the university is covered. In the same way with data and everything, we don't want to get ourselves in trouble. We don't want to get our institutions in trouble. We want that liability cover. And remember what I said, as a lowest form. As a lowest form, we want to just protect ourselves from liability, but from the highest form, we want to preserve people's dignity. Thanks. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Doctor, for a wonderful comment. I think, I agree with you. Let us be more softer. I think we've been too soft. Most of the data sets that is available on our fixture platform is the data sets that was submitted people or the colleagues that had the private accounts from fixture. But otherwise, we asked fixture if they are any UNISA affiliated researcher, please move your research to Figshare or else. The other ones was from PLOS, Public Library of Science, and then if they're UNISA affiliated, they let them move the research, the data sets to our institutional research. But thank you for the wonderful comment, Dr. About you, Tando. Don't know if there are any questions or comments.
There's a comment in the chat. It says, would it not assist with the reproducibility if this is made part of the formal process to follow until the final green tick is given to the study or research outputs?
Would it not assist? Okay, I can read. Would it not assist with the repository if this may be part of the formal process to follow until the formal tick given? Yeah, it would actually. Thank you for the question. It would help, and we working collaboratively also. We give talks to the workshops with the College of Graduate Studies to enlighten or inform the postdoc or the doctoral students or students that we have this service called Research Data Management Plan. Please assist us in when you're collecting your data. You can put your data in our repository, but we will close for such a period of time the data itself and open up but the metadata, it's a default that must be open. And it can be shared with the researcher permission. Thank you.
Thank you. If we don't have any more questions, I'd like to send out a heartfelt thank you to both our esteemed facilitators, Dr. Tariq and Mr. Makaba, for their invaluable, insightful, and expertise in today's workshop. Your contributions have instrumentally enriching our understanding of data planning and management. We greatly appreciate your time and dedication to advancing our knowledge in this field. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tando. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you from my side as well. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening to us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
This was really insightful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll send out a part 2 invitation to everyone as soon as maybe in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
Bye.
day.
Yeah.
Bye.